get back into it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back, and the co-host, La Rochelle, is back to save us after my abysmal performance last week on my own. He had to come back. He went all the way to Australia to get these fucking locks for us. We got UFC 284 in Perth, Australia tomorrow, 9 p.m. our time, headlined by Islam Makhachev, Volkanovski, the lightweight belt and the pound-for-pound belt on the line. Co-headline for the featherweight interim between Yair and Josh Emmett. Top to bottom, this card kind of sucks except for those two fights. We're not even going to cover the fifth fight on the main card. We're just going to do the top four, and then I'll let La Rochelle say his things before we get into it.
Ladies and gents, good to be back. Of course, the hiatus is over. Back to Perth, Australia, as we go to UFC 284. As you said, headlined arguably the best fight we're going to see to date that I can remember. You got the pound for pound 1 and 2 meeting at not a catch weight, but they're one apart. So lightweight to featherweight, you're going to settle it at 155 and wouldn't want it in any better form or fashion than Volkanovski being the number one guy in his backyard of Australia. But to kick off this main card, we got Justin Tafa versus Parker Porter. Both guys are not ranked. Tafa is minus 125 and a damn near doppelganger than Tai Tuivasa, if I had to say so myself. He's about 6 foot, 270 pounds. Both these men are. They could have got him from a truck yard for all I care. They're huge. They're short. Tafa's 5-3. He's won his last 2 out of 5 in the UFC. Yeah, like I said, neither of these guys are ranked. I see both of them just biting down on their mouth guards, getting after it, heavy hands, and yeah, someone's going to sleep. I'll put it there.
Yeah, and like you said, Parker Porter, he stands at an astounding 6 foot and weighs about 300. He's one of the few people that has to cut weight to make the heavyweight limit. Insane. But I will give him this one thing, this cool little tidbit you might not know about. This man has fought John Jones and lost via round 1 knockout in John Jones' second professional fight all the way back in 2008. When you go through Parker Porter's fight, it's very simple. He's lost all his fights via knockout, one arm triangle choke, and then he lost and then got a W because he lost via illegal shots to the back of the head. So there's one thing I can say about Parker Porter. Do not expect him to make it to the final bell because this man eats shots and he's going to get knocked out. And then when you look at his wins, you know, he hasn't had a knockout win since 2019 in not even the UFC or Bellator. He's coming off a loss via rear naked choke in the first round to Jaltin Almeida. Before that, he won 2 unanimous decisions to Chase Sherman and Alan Budzat. Getting into his fighting style, you know, not judging a book by its cover, but judging a book by its cover. If you look at the man, that's exactly what you're going to expect from his fighting style. This is the old style of MMA. This is going to be go straight at you and throw haymakers and hope that one lands and then hope that the other person doesn't connect.
Absolutely. Yeah, couldn't have said so better myself. Whatever the over-under on the rounds is in this, and it couldn't be over 1.5 if I had to guess, take the under. I'm taking Justin Tafa based on Parker Porter's 8 years his elder. The man's pushing 40. He's been hit in the head about 1 billion times since World War II, probably when he was born. And it's Tafa's backyard, right? It's in the Aussie lights. It's going to be nice and bright. And I think old man Porter is going to hang it up after this one with a slick KO in the first round.
Yeah, the only thing I have about Justin Tafa is he's 5-3 and he just takes so long in between all his fights. He's had 2 canceled bouts before this. His last fight was all the way in 2021 of December. And then he had 3 fights then before that in 2020, 2 losses to Felipe and Vandera, which very interesting, losing to Vandera, who has a very similar style to Porter, except he's like 6'9". But with that being said, I honestly think this is a toss-up between whoever you want to pick. I'm with La Rochelle. Just take the under and get your free money. I mean, either of these guys could win. There's not much separation in skill-wise. There's not much separation in length. Not really anything you can nitpick via the numbers. You just have to take it at what it is of 2 absolutely huge heavyweights who don't really have cardio and who are known to get knocked out or knockout. So I'm taking the under, and then, I guess I'll just be against Larshell. I'll ride with my boy Parker Porter, double PP. Let's see if he can get it done for me.
And Justin Taffa, might I add you, he's 5-3, right? But when a bout is decided by KO or TKO, the man is 5-1. So when the leather starts throwing and he bites down on that mouth guard, he tends to have major success. So flip the coin how you want. I'll take Taffa, and we need to start getting these records back to order to see who holds the hierarchy in these picks.
Yes, we are keeping track of these records, ladies and gentlemen. Don't you worry. We just need to accumulate a few pay-per-views under our belt, and then we'll really see who wears the pants in this relationship. All right, let's move on to the last three fights. We finally move on to somewhat of a very good fight. Very interesting in the welterweight decision. We have Jack Della Maddalena minus 305 versus Randy Brown at plus 255.
Yeah, and Jack Della Maddalena, neither of these guys again ranked both in the welterweight division, but Jack is 13-2. He's won all of his 4 in the UFC, derailing his last 3 opponents with knockouts in the first. This dude is on an absolute tear. He is 5'11", and against Randy Brown, he'll have a 4-inch height and a 5-inch reach advantage. So this is a stylistic matchup to someone he hasn't seen before in his competition, but his relative success, I mean, he's riding the hype train right now. And again, he's fighting in his backyard to continue this tear, much like Taffa.
Yeah, and he's facing Randy Rude Boy Brown, an absolute lightning style fighter in the welterweight division. And this is where Jack Della Maddalena is going to really get to see where he's made of. Randy Brown is the gatekeeper for the top 15 in the welterweight division. And Jack's been on a tear recently, and this would really let him have a crack at getting into the top 15. I want to read you off the losses that Randy Brown's faced, and this is why he is the gatekeeper. His last loss came in 2020, knockout by Vicente Luque. Before that, 2018, Nico Price. Before that, 2017, Bilal Muhammad. Besides Nico Price, for those of you that don't know, Bilal Muhammad and Vicente Luque are top 5 fighters in the welterweight. And he's on a 4-fight win streak from last fight, Francisco Trinaldo, who just retired. Before that, Chaos Williams. Before that, Jared Gooden. Before that, Alex Oliveira. Randy Brown's style is he's very lanky, huge reach, 78 inches at the welterweight division. That is absolutely insane. He likes to stand on the outside. He likes to throw high kicks, low kicks, long, rangy punches, and don't doubt his power too. That's why he's always been a problem at welterweight, because he's also 6'3". So he has that perfect build for MMA, just tall and lanky, and especially in the welterweight division. He's not even a middleweight. With that kind of reach and that kind of height, he does give a lot of fighters problems.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I thought these odds being that skewed by the bookmakers might make me seem that they know something that we don't, right? Because Randy's a tough guy to fight. Exactly. He's gatekeeping that 15 rank spot, and he has had much stronger competition. There's something, again, they see that we don't. This will definitely, his size alone will cause problems for Jack. Although you can't argue with the fact Randy's wins compared to Jack's wins. Randy, if he does win, a lot of the times it's by a unanimous decision or split decision. So I think if it goes the distance, it favors in Randy's way, because him being the more elusive fighter, keeping his range, staying on the outside, he could ride that out to the later rounds and eke a decision. I don't see him finishing Jack, but then on the other side of the coin, I could see Jack definitely putting this away in the first somehow. His most impressive attribute to me has to be his counter punching, but then that kind of goes null and void with a guy like Randy, who's so elusive and long. It's hard to counterpunch a guy who's got several inches of height and reach on you. So yeah, the minus 330 for Jack is kind of dumbfounding me.
Yeah, and I think, if we look at Jack's record, he started his career 0-2, both first one knockout, next one rear naked choke. Then he goes on this 13-fight win streak, knockout, rear naked choke, knockout, doctor stoppage, knockout, unanimous decision, knockout. He's had one of his wins not be a knockout. And this is why I think the odds are really skewed. I also think it's because he's Australian. He's in their backyard. Randy Brown is a very good counter striker. And if we've watched Jack in his last 3 fights, coming out of the gate, he's like a bull looking at a red cape. He runs straight at you, and he has eaten some big shots in his most recent fights. You know, he obviously didn't lose because he was overpowering the guy, but he just swarms and overwhelms with this power. And I'd really like to see if Jack could mix in his wrestling in this, because I think if he takes it to the ground, he's going to have a clear advantage with Randy Brown. I think charging in there head first and just trying to rip his head off is not the way you want to fight Randy Brown, because like La Rochelle says, if he does that and Randy survives the first round, I think Jack could be gassed not only, and then it's Randy's ball game of just sitting on the outside and just picking you apart.
Yeah, absolutely. And these are the attributes we haven't seen from Jack. Based on what you just said, all his fights, especially the ones that he's winning, are ending very early. So that's the big question mark, how his gas tank would suffice in those later rounds. So I think the safe bet here is if you do ride with Jack, I would take him in the first, early second, if possible, by way of knockout. But on the other side of the coin, you could have the upset with Randy, eking out a decision. I'm not saying if it goes past the first that Jack would be gassed right away. It's just something we haven't seen. But overall, I mean, according to the weigh-ins that happened earlier, dude looks in pretty phenomenal shape.
Yeah, and this is a big step up in competition for Jack. So I really don't think, once you start getting into these top 15s, straight running at people and overpowering them just doesn't work like that. Randy's been around the block plenty of times. Randy's fought very good fighters. You taking him out in the first 30 seconds, minute of fight, I really don't see that. I think Jack's game plan needs to be mixing the wrestling, because if he stays on the feet, I think Randy Brown is going to win this fight decisively, just because we haven't seen the technical side of Jack's punching yet. We've just seen the overpower, swarm, connect, and just finish. I'm actually taking Randy at this huge odds because, like La Rochelle said earlier, maybe Vegas knows something that we don't. There we go. Joe.
He's
shout out to the dog mascot that we have, JoJo. He's been a absolute inspiration. He keeps the lights on this podcast. He pays the
proud
bills.
Supporter. He's the racing wiener in Houston, I'll tell you that.
And yeah, it's just I don't like him at minus 300. I think that's really just overpowering the odds, and I'm not going to lay that to begin with. I do agree with La Rochelle, though. I think if you want to bet on Jack, I think taking him by knockout, I think that would be a good bet. I think a second round would be really good, because I just don't see Randy getting taken out in the first. And then I think if it goes to the third, I think Randy's going to start to pull away. But I like Randy at plus 255. I think from his experience and his ability to control distance with that 78-inch reach, because like Jack has of this just bull charging, it's kind of hard to charge someone when they have a 78-inch reach. And you have to get past that. That's an enormous amount of distance to cover and hope to not get like a cross right hook or just a fucking high kick to the side of the head. So I'm going to split again with La Rochelle. See, this is the good one, ladies and gentlemen. This is where our rankings are going to start to determine. We're picking different people. I'm going to ride with Randy on this one, and I'm just going to take the money line.
And before you get too high on mighty on getting in on someone way taller and lankier than you, I will provide one of the best examples when James Vick, I believe, was calling out an up and coming Justin Gaethje. James Vick had about 5 or 6 inches of height on him, several inches of reach. Didn't matter whatsoever. Power prevailed that day, and I could see something similar definitely happening if Jack is able to close the distance and eliminate that separation and put him on his back and let the hands fly. I see Jack winning this by knockout. So the spread is even.
That's a great analogy, ladies and gentlemen. That's very close to the styles, just different size, different weight, but that's a very similar, almost eerie type of similarity. But we will see also another example. It's going to be in the main event today. We have Volk versus Islam. Talk about size difference. We will get to that. Moving on, though, the co-main the interim featherweight belt, one of the most exciting, dynamic strikers on the planet. Number 2 ranked Yair Rodriguez closing at a -165, taking on an absolute power puncher at number 5, +140, Josh Emmett.
I love this fight. Yair being the second ranked versus the number 5th guy. This spells fireworks up and down. You got Yair 15-3, won 3 out of his last 4 in the UFC. Most recently knocked out Brian Ortega, but he's also beat the likes of Jeremy Stevens and the Korean Zombie prior to that. His only recent loss was to Max Holloway, and we all know how he was considered one of the GOATs of the sport for a long, long time. So there's no shame in that. Yair will have a 5-inch height advantage, but Josh Emmett, in his own regard, is riding a 5-fight win streak, most recently over Calvin Kattar, which is massive on its own, because we all know how good Calvin Kattar is too with his hands. So, this is, get your popcorn ready for this one. This is where it starts to get entertaining.
Yeah, these two, the top 2, these are absolute bangers. This might be a fight of the year candidate, just by the style matchup. With Josh Emmett, I will say, you mentioned Jeremy Stevens. Josh Emmett's not going to like me to say this, but Josh Emmett is tied for the most with Jeremy Stevens, most in UFC history of getting knocked down. I think it's 17 times Josh Emmett's been knocked down in fights. So keep that in mind. He's 18-2, 38 years old. So the window is closing. This might be the last window he has. He's on a 5-fight win streak. Before that, we bring him up again, lost via knockout to Jeremy Stevens, gave him his first loss of his career, knocked out Michael Johnson, knocked out Mirsad Bektic, and then he's beat Shane Burgos, Dan Ige, and then one of our favorite fighters, a split decision, razor close win against Calvin Kattar that could have honestly gone either way. Very interesting. So with that, what you get with Josh Emmett is an absolute, the man's also just jacked beyond jacked. If you want to know something, definitely want to test him, USADA. Let's check it out a little bit. But he's got a dynamic right hand. That cross right hand is insane. His power boxing, he loves to just, he has the record for most knockdowns. It's because he fucking gets in the damn pocket and he'll sit there. And, against someone like Yair Rodriguez, where just the crazy angles that he throws, like his knockout against Korean Zombie, which was this spinning backwards, like elbow, like something I don't even know how to do. It's going to be really interesting when you're facing someone like that and you're just going to sit in a telephone booth with him. I want to get your thoughts on, Emmett does have a good ground game. Do you think he tries to implement that versus someone like Yair, which we know he can do on the feet?
I was going to say that's one of the X factors that I had in this fight. The first one being it's whichever guy is going to give up the center of the octagon, right? Both these guys, if you land first, that's the key to success on backing up the other guy, because if Emmett lets Rodriguez sit, that's when he gets very creative with his kicks, his flying attacks, his knees. So landing first for Josh is just as equally important to avoid the initial power as it is for Yair. If he just waits and lets Josh get settled and just push the distance and lets his hands fly, because both these guys are equally dangerous, right? That's not the argument here. It's definitely who pushes the pace first, but that is something that Josh definitely has in his back pocket, is his wrestling that we don't see be utilized quite a bit because of the 17 knockdowns and then some. And he's always fishing for that performance of the night bonus as well. The man's pretty old, so right, like you said, the window's closing, so he's trying to put on the most dynamic performances of his career now. I love that that Yair has beat a guy like Jeremy Stevens, right? And pretty decisively, because stylistically in my head, just thinking about it, Josh and Jeremy, they have very similar styles. So I feel like Yair might have, that's another thing in his back pocket. He could have an edge against a guy who bites down on their chin, bites down on their mouth guard, pushes forward, throws heavy leather. And Yair being super lateral and very elusive, I think plays in his favor.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong with Josh Emmett, he has insane power, but with that power, he is a volume puncher as well. He's nearly identical. I think he might have Yair beat. Actually, he's barely. Yair lands about 4.6 per minute, and Josh lands about 4.28. and then absorption the same, defense the same. They're very similar on the feet regarding statistic wise. I think what's going to be, like Larshell said earlier, is who takes the center of the octagon early. And both of the men in their fights love to get in there and take the center of the octagon. Yair loves, I can't wait for it, loves to use these crazy kicks in the beginning, and his gas tank with his kicks is insane. If you ever seen some videos of dudes that are just high kicking left and right, Yair implements that in round one immediately, and he'll throw like 20 kicks in 30 seconds just to secure that inside and the center of the octagon and really back off his opponent, knowing that Josh Emmett will eat kicks, eat anything, honestly. I think it does boil down to whether Josh can get it to the ground, because Yair does have a good ground game. I think Josh Emmett I think he's stronger, and I think he can hold him down, and I think he'd prefer to be on the ground, especially just stylistically how Josh goes about it on the feet. And someone you're fighting with, Yair Rodriguez, like he said, lateral, and just the angles that punches are going to come at you that you like, you're not going to be able to replicate that in training camp. Whereas Yair can replicate Josh Emmett. Just give me a boxer that's going to throw heavy on the right and power punches. With that, I don't know the over under. I would guess it's probably 2.5. I don't think it's 1.5 because they only do that for heavyweight. It's going to be 2.5. That's going to be really interesting. But with that being said, I'm going to take Yair.
Fuck. I'm taking Yair. I love the odds. I was gonna say it's honestly flip a coin. I would definitely take the under. I was gonna say flip a coin on who gets put to sleep. I doubt this fight goes to the decision. Much like how you just said that if Emmett utilizes his wrestling, if things go awry or south for him, God, if there's anybody to do it in this day and age right now in the UFC, it's Yair for a Jorge Masvidal type flying knee on a power double type of thing. I would not be surprised if Emmett gets caught on a sloppy takedown if he's tired. And even if he does get a takedown, I feel like he's carrying around way too much muscle. He has better chance to stay on the feet and utilize his strikes rather than grapple for 5 to 10 minutes. Because I don't think he gets up after that. He's the same fighter. There's just too much muscle to move around. So I absolutely love Yair Rodriguez in this fight as well. Take the under, and I would take by knockout or TKO. I could definitely see that happening.
Yeah, I also want to say, now that I'm thinking about it more, I could see the overhitting just because both these guys have been in absolute wars recently. Yair Rodriguez versus Max Holloway. That was an insane fight. Josh Emmett, Calvin Kattar. That was an insane fight. That went 5 rounds. The fight before that, he fought Dan Ige. That went 5 rounds. They both threw about 130 punches. With that being said, Josh Emmett is 37, and especially with that Calvin Kattar, who I love Calvin Kattar, and he outlanded him too in the fight versus Josh Emmett. That was a war, and the chin does give out eventually. Not saying he hasn't been knocked out since 2017, but with a guy like Yair, where you're not going to see the punches, and those are the ones that knock you out. And I just love the odds like this. I mean, minus 160, minus 150, whatever it is, like close to a pick 'em. I'm going to ride with Yair because I think him versus Volkanovski is going to be a really good fight, and I can't wait to see that. But first fight that we pick the same guy, let's see it, Yair. Let's get us a third dub for the night.
Absolutely.
All right. The biggest fight of 2023, one of the biggest fights in a long time. Islam Makhachev, the lightweight king, second pound for pound. I think he closed around a minus 350. I don't have the odds right now. Versus the pound for pound number 1 featherweight king, Alexander the Great Volkanovski.
Islam Makhachev, as you said, he's now at minus 400 as I checked today. 23-1. The man hasn't lost since 2015, riding an 11-fight win streak. Ranked wins against guys like Bobby Green, Dan Hooker, and Charles Oliveira. Need I digress? He'll have a 4-inch height advantage, but that's about it. Volk has a slight reach advantage. And honestly, fights like this, when you have two of the men at the peak and pinnacle of their careers, absolute prime, there's hard weaknesses to spot out in either of these gentlemen. Islam isn't the better striker. I'll start with that. He uses mainly his strikes to set up his grappling entrances. and to where Volk is no slouch on his back or grappling department anywhere. There's no takes or digs I can give at either of these guys. It's just finding the slight strengths that one might have against the other to see who's really going to prevail. What I don't like is the pound for pound one and pound for pound two, the odds being skewed by a total of like 700, a minus 400 to a plus 300.
Yeah, and I think we'll dive in deeper to this, but I'll just give you the spiel on Volkanovski. He's closing in on possibly dethroning Jose Aldo as the number 1 featherweight of all time. The man's held the belt for, God, how long is this point? Basically, like 3 years, 4 years. He's defended it 8 times. He's on a 12-fight win streak. Fought 3 fights against Max Holloway, had a standing knockout versus the Korean Zombie, had that fight against Brian Ortega where we saw him get out of that just insane submission attempt by Ortega. Volkanovski, I think he's probably the most well-rounded fighter in the entire UFC. There's no part of his game that you can really look at and be like, that's where I can get him. The man has power. The man has volume. The man has good ground game, good ground offense, good ground defense. And on top of that, I would probably say he's top 3 in the UFC in fight IQ. A lot of fighters get in the fight and forget everything because you're in a fight, you're getting punched in the face. I think Volkanovski does a really good job of understanding everything, almost as good. I would say John Jones probably has the number 1 fight IQ, but he's very close up there of just understanding his opponent, understanding what he does. And he's known throughout the UFC. People have asked him, like, how did you get this good? And he said, I put myself in the worst positions possible every time because that way I know there's nothing in the cage that I won't see. And just watching his training videos for this training camp, I know he's dialed. I wouldn't say the featherweight's been getting boring for him per se, but he's kind of lapped everyone at this point and, just run out of opponents. He's beat everyone. There is the interim featherweight on the line, but at the same time, he has beat Holloway and Ortega, who I would say are 1 and 2. So he did have to move up.
Without a doubt. And again, what bugs me the most, the odds makers are writing off Volk way too soon, in my opinion. And it's outright disrespectful for the best fighter on the planet right now. I mean, like you said, the way he picked apart much tougher competition than Islam, such as Max Holloway twice, it's not too far-fetched to spy out this upset, the way I'm seeing it, right? I mean, Islam, he's a bigger man and he possesses the best grappling in the UFC since Khabib. And I don't think that's up for debate, right? But Volk, in his own regard, he's not an easy man to get a hold of. He's extremely strong for his size. And in my opinion, he has some of the best lateral movement striking since the likes of Frankie Edgar, in my opinion. And he's better at it. That's the biggest problem. The way he lights anybody up, some Dominic Cruz-like movement too for a bigger guy than even Cruz was. The way he cuts off angles is some of the best we've seen. And I think that presents a plethora of challenges for a guy like Islam, who end goal is to get a hold of you and put you to the ground. I'm going to get right to it. I'll take Volk by upset, by decision. I don't think a finish is in the works just because how tough Islam is, right? These are 2 best guys in the world. Iron sharpens iron. That doesn't mean someone's going to go to sleep or get submitted early and often, right? This could be a war, much like our co-main event that we do have. But I'm loving Volkanovski in his backyard with the man that I haven't seen any weaknesses in his game and facing much tougher competition than Islam has as of late.
Yeah, I can say without a doubt, both these fighters aren't going to tap. And both these fighters, if they're getting knocked out, they're going knocked out cold. These are 2 tough men. Also, I think with this huge size difference, yes, Islam Makhachev walks around at about 200 pounds. Let's make that clear. Huge weight cut. Volkanovski used to play rugby and weigh 220 pounds, and he's wrestled against bigger guys. Like Volk said it earlier, is like he knows he's short. Like that's nothing to him. It's all about strength. And I think with that being said, like I don't think Volkanovski's scared about, like, everyone's making a big deal like, oh, he's so much bigger than you. But like we just talked about the Justin Gaethje, James, like, height and length isn't everything. It's power and fight IQ. And I think especially with that, adding on, and, I'll cut to the chase, the safe money, if I can sum this up, if Islam Makhachev makes slight work of Volkanovski and makes it look easy, hands down, no debate, Islam Makhachev is about to be one of the GOATs of MMA, because if he can do, he's steamrolled everyone, hasn't had any difficult fight in his entire UFC. My thing that I want to point out, and I'm riding with Volkanovski. You can't go against the pound for pound number one at +3 whatever. Like, when the fuck are you going to get a pound for pound number one fighter at +3-1 odds? With that being said, and I want to add on also, and Larshel brought this up, these lateral movements that Volkanovski is so good at. We haven't seen anyone really challenge Islam with the lateral movements except Charles Oliveira. And I know he got submitted in the second round, but for those of you casuals that don't pay attention to the full fight, I want you to go back and rewatch that. And I want you to watch round one, because the way he got the submission was off of that knockdown that stunned Charles. In round one, Oliveira got taken down by Islam and stumped him on the ground, stopped Islam's offense. He knew how to defend. Now, granted, Charles has the best jiu-jitsu, but Islam can be shot. Charles proved it when he got taken down, and Charles showed kind of the blueprint that no one refuses to do because they're so scared of Islam's grappling. And that's, you have to get in his face and get close to Islam. You can't stand around and give him that opportunity, like Lawler said, to throw strikes and then go for the takedown. You got to bring it in close and bring it into the clinch. And Habib said, oh, we're expecting the clinch. He's going to eat a lot of knees. I don't think Islam's face short might even help Volk in this sense, because he's so short and stocky. I don't think because Islam's probably, wrestling bigger guys. I don't think he's used to someone that's going to be really tiny and really strong. And Volk said it, and I believe it. Like, he is way stronger than a lot of people give him credit for, only because he's like 5'6", but I guarantee he definitely has the strength. And I think what's going to happen is Islam's already said it. He wants to get the knockout because he wants to prove that he's not just a ground game. And I think that could be to his demise. I also think if Volkanovski stuffs takedowns from Islam, it'll be the first opponent that's ever done that. And I think Islam's game plan will go completely out the window, because he's going to be very confused if Volkanovski can show him, like, look, you're not going to ragdoll me. Like, if you want me to go to the ground, like, you're going to have to really work for it. And I think that's going to be huge. And I think with the crowd behind him, I think with the energy, I think Volk's going to really show that, like, these Dagestani, especially these Islams of the world that look unbeatable, I think he's going to lay the groundwork to, like, how you can actually beat these Sambo type MMA fighters.
Well, you took the words right out of my mouth, right? In regards to, I love that Volk is the smaller guy, and having that lower center of gravity puts all the odds towards him as far as takedown defense. And these lateral movements, he's not going to give him, he actually probably will give Islam space, because he moves. He's not the in dirty boxing clinch type of fighter like Gaethje, for example, who loves to close the distance. Although he's so good at his leg kicks and whatnot, as I brought him up before, but still, Volk is so good at utilizing his strikes and his IQ, and he mixes everything up so well. I think he is going to stump Islam in that regard too. But if Islam does get it to the ground, it could be a whole different world, because we haven't seen Volk get controlled on the ground, get beat up, scramble, get beat again, and then demoralized like Islam does to a lot of these guys. And it's hard to watch, but that's what it happens. But if anyone has the defense and the scramble efforts, and that's a loose way of putting it, that Volkanovski possesses, I mean, if anyone, it's him. So I think the stars have aligned. I think you're right. I think we're looking at a big upset here, and I love Volkanovski by decision with the upset. I think everything's stacked against him, because aside from the grappling, he excels in every other portion and every other facet of the fight. The crowd behind him, he has great coaches. It's going to be loud as fuck in there. And yeah, I see the Aussie coming home with this one.
Yeah, and like, let's not lie. Like, I assume this fight's eventually going to go to the ground. I would be astonished if Islam doesn't get a takedown. I think Volkanovski is going to really have to utilize the cage, in the sense of when he gets these or goes for these takedowns, really get up against that cage and not get taken down in the open middle, because if that happens, then we're going to really see what Volkanovski can do, because we do know what Islam's capable of on the ground, and it's pure domination. But to wrap it all up, because we're just repeating ourselves, take Volkanovski with this plus money, give him a chance, give the dog a chance, and let him show in his own backyard that height doesn't mean anything, that all this shit Islam's saying about you're tiny, you're small, David and Goliath time, baby. Let's make it happen.
Couldn't have said it better myself. We're split on 2, and I wanted to go Islam just to keep the records flickering, but I can't go against Volk on this. No, not a chance.
No.
Well,
with that, I'll let La Rochelle get the last word, and we will be out of here.
Ladies and gents, to a star-studded weekend we have upon us with the bright lights of the Super Bowl on Sunday and what have you. Do not forget about tomorrow. Spend some time with your loved ones. Pound some back for the boys. Enjoy your weekend, because this is star-studded, action-packed, pay-per-view, top of the tier, Super Bowl-esque of the UFC. Brought to you by none other than the E Squared MMA Show.